welcome to Heroes Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando. And we are on episode 90.
90. Yep.
90. So, you know.
I knew it was going to be bad when you started with
Well, no. So, you know, when we prep for this, people supposed to get tired of this. But, you know, when I prep for this, I always put the next episode number. And I was tracking, you know, when I prep for our next update episode, which is dropping on Wednesday, which is going to be an interesting one because there's some interesting updates happening.
Really?
Not interesting, like life-changing. It's just like, you know, we're in the middle of Q4 and there's a lot of interesting things happening. You know, we got eBay Glitchgate still happening. We have Amazon dropping the hammer on people. You know,
Ouch.
We have stuff happening. So, but that's not what this episode is about. What's this episode about?
So we are finishing up our Make Your Bed by Admiral McRaven. And, you know, I'm excited about it. I think it was a great, like,
you're talking like it's over. We haven't started the episode.
Well, I mean, like just reading it. The reading it part, for at least for us, is over. It was a nice little like bite-sized bit of reading to do every day that had something kind of either. I don't even want to say it's practical in the sense that it's like just something to think about. Something
it
to
is
mull
practical
over.
though.
I mean, there's practical aspects of it, but it's not a book that's like, here's step 1, 2, and 3 on how to apply this to your life. It's like a more general. Here's a theory. Here's a concept. And then you're kind of left to yourself to mull over like, all right, now what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my life today? So the make your bed part, like that one, that one's very practical. But then some of the ones we're going to be talking about today, like our first one, which is you must dare greatly. And this idea of like taking obstacles head on. And, you know, that's something where it's difficult to be perfectly practical because everybody's obstacles are different. But the principle is something that you could be thinking about constantly throughout your day. Like, how am I tackling obstacles? How am I doing that? And so it was nice. And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast with this book and other books, and people have made comments. And I think that a lot of this stuff isn't like groundbreaking, earth-shattering.
No, it's common sense at times, but we need reminders.
Reminders, yep. Yeah.
And that's what, you know, through this book. And you know, it's kind of one of those things I always talk about that, you know, a lot of motivational stuff is just platitudes.
Yep.
And they just throw in some extra words.
Yep.
Right. And we're not trying to be a motivational podcast. I mean, well, okay, that sounded terrible. That's not terrible.
We want to demotivate you.
We want to make sure you're miserable and you don't get anything done. No, what I mean is, you know, we're not trying to come off as these motivational gurus. Now, if we're able to inspire and motivate some, we're happy to. Like, we love the DMs that we get, the inspiring messages, and it motivates us to keep moving forward and do these book reviews or these level up reviews. Now, let's change directory a little bit before we get back to the book. An example of us no longer attempting to. There's no right way to say this. But in order to show that we're not just trying to be these motivational gurus, we're switching it up a little bit, right? Our next book.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are we reading for our next book?
Oh, so our next book is one that I actually haven't done a lot of research about, but I've heard people
I've done
talk
zero.
about it. Really?
But it's been recommended to us by a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard people recommend it. There's another podcast that I listen to where there's like a paid portion of that podcast where they're going through this book, and I'm like, oh, bummer. I'm not a subscriber to the podcast.
And we're doing it for free.
We're doing it for free, yeah.
Pure as a podcast.
Right. But anyways, the book is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And I think the idea...
You got to read the second line.
Okay.
It's intense.
Negotiating as if your life depended on it.
That's huge.
It is huge. And I think it comes from, and I could be wrong, we'll do more research, obviously, before we do our book review, but I think it comes from the perspective of a person who was an FBI negotiator for like ransom, right? Like people who are like ransomed and like.
You want me to read what it says?
Let's read it.
A former international hostage negotiator for the FBI offers a new field-tested approach to high-stakes negotiations, whether in the boardroom or at home. A Wall Street Journal bestseller.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think it's one of those things where this, again, isn't going to be super practical reselling. Like, as you read the book, like, here's step 1 of how to negotiate at a garage sale, right? But the principles that you can take, I think, from this idea of like negotiating is important. And we negotiate all the time, like negotiating, whether or not, like, I think the base way of thinking about it is we negotiate like a price, but we're always negotiating. It goes so much deeper than that. Every conversation you have with people, there's some kind of negotiating happening, right? Like there's a give and take always, and trying to figure out how to do that well, how to do that in a way that you're going to benefit from it while also not, you know, being corrupt and hurting other people. And so I think I'm excited about that book, but but that's in a couple of weeks. So let's get into it.
But the link will be below if you want to order ahead of time. I really think this is one you're going to want to read along. The only reason I say that is because most of people that recommended it to us through IG have said it's made a difference in their business and their negotiations. Somebody had talked about like when they bought a car, they applied some of the principles. And I don't know what all that means, but obviously practical. So maybe you want to pick it up, not just because you want to allow Pierre's podcast to make 10 cents on the link or whatever it is, but because it'll actually pay way more than we could ever get from the affiliate link.
Yeah. The value that you'll be able to take from it.
I just needed to drop that. Okay.
All right,
you go ahead.
Cool. All right. So our first chapter is chapter 6. So we're halfway done. And these chapters, again, they're only a couple of pages long. So if you don't have the book, it's kind of expensive, I think, for what it is, for how much you can get out of it, right? But because it's so small. But the nice thing
Mike?
No, well, and that's what I mean is if you're looking at just page count, it's very expensive. But if you think about, because it's so easily digestible, this is a book I'm probably going to go back to probably once a year. I'll just go through it. It'll probably take me a few days to get through the whole thing, and just those constant reminders. And so I think at that point it's worth it. So each chapter is only a few pages. So again, if you haven't picked it up yet, it might be worthwhile. So this one is You Must Dare Greatly. And the subcaption is, if you want to change the world, slide down the obstacle head first.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he tells a story in here, right? About how he could have made this obstacle course, I guess. It's not called an obstacle course.
Yeah, I mean, it is an obstacle course.
But, in order to beat his personal record and, finish it at the time that he needed to take a risk. But he was so scared about taking that risk that he chose instead to play it the safe route. And he never made that time until he finally decided just to let go. And what was it? He had to dive head first?
Yeah. So the one of the parts of the obstacle course is like a line that they have to kind of slide down. And the safe way of doing it, I think they called it like the sloth method, is like you hang underneath the rope and you kind of hand over foot and you just go down it. And then the not safe method is to literally sit on top of the rope head first and just kind of use it like a slide. And he really had reason to be cautious about this. The concern was, if you do it this way, it is much faster. However, the risk of falling off and breaking a leg or breaking an arm is way, way up. And if that happens, you're out. You will not finish the program. Right. So there's this
that's a huge risk.
Yeah. You're going to get a personal best or a course record, which may not actually count for anything. You could still pass the class without the personal best or you could hurt yourself and then be done, and you might not ever be able to finish this program. But one of the instructors that was there, one of the I think he said it was a Vietnam vet, said this. He said, the obstacle course is going to beat you every time unless you start taking some risks. And then he goes on to say how that ended up working out in real life war experiences. And yeah, I think that's a really big thing. Do you have any examples of big risks that you've taken in your life?
I have plenty. The biggest one is, I could talk about the reselling one, and we've shared that a lot. But, big risk for me was, do I want to go back? I guess I want to go back. Big risk for me was when I initially moved to San Diego.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right? That was huge because I was one of those guys, and again, we'll relate it to reselling, but we're trying to relate to everything. But I'm one of those guys that I'm a hometown kind of guy. I never wanted any change. I remember growing up, and I wanted to teach at the same school I went to. I wanted to coach the same team. I wanted to live on, if I preferably could, live on the same street that I grew up on. I wanted to do all this. And then I took a big risk and I moved out to Wisconsin for schooling. But the bigger risk, because at least when I went to school, it's kind of different. Everybody's, new, right? So everybody can be awkward together. And, I was 19 years old. And no, I was actually 17 years old. Nice. And it's okay to but at that stage, being awkward together, it's okay. Yeah. Everybody's figuring it out. It's kind of fun. But then after I graduated, I took a job here in San Diego. And in this job, it was scary because I knew absolutely no one. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a place to stay. I had nothing. Now, when I moved down here, I did. I was married. I had a small child. You can't just do those things.
Yeah.
I guess you could. I know people that have. But it was scary. And the risk was leaving the comfort of home in the sense, and I know this sounds kind of silly, but we're in the stage where right now it's like, it's kind of the thing, like to move back with your family, right? To build up that capital, to buy a home or build your business, which I'm fine with. I don't have any issues with that. For me though, at that time, that would have been the easier route. The easier route would have been, we had a nice home in San Francisco. Things were good. I was making money, but I wouldn't have, I look back and I go, I wouldn't have made it anywhere. Not that I made it like I'm this, good time guy, but I would have been in that same kind of monotonous kind of life. And instead, I came down here and it was a huge risk. I remember the place, I didn't even know where I was moving to. And I remember speaking to the superintendent and I didn't know he was brand new. And he's like, hey, there's this, I go, what do you think of this neighborhood? He goes, oh, I think that neighborhood's great. Moved down here, drove into the neighborhood.
Not great.
No, terrible. Like probably the worst place that I could have moved to. I mean, there were homicides that took place, drug deals. I mean, it was pretty bad, but it was a risk, right? The other risk was I had no car. And sure enough, down the block, another new teacher was there and we carpooled every day, right? And so I'm not saying that everything falls into place, but had I not taken that risk, I would not have had the incredible 15 years I had there at that location, right? And I'm still in San Diego, and I don't think I'll ever leave from San Diego, but I wouldn't have known a wider world. And I know this is a pretty simple illustration. It's not as hardcore as, I quit my job. I had zero in my savings. I had no money, but it was kind of like that in this scenario because I had my first set of kitchen furniture was a patio table and lawn chairs. That somebody had given me because they came to my place and like, where do you guys eat? I'm like, well, we're just trying to figure that out. Right.
Yeah.
But from that beginning, right, that, and part of it was I was kind of like embarrassed, but I eventually got over that. I want to talk about that in a little bit. That embarrassment to me is one of the things that will hold people back and it held me back a lot of times. So anyways, so that is my risk. Yeah. Were you going to share something or were you just looking for examples?
No, that's good. I mean, I have kind of similar in some ways. I mean, becoming a teacher, I was working in kind of corporate world. I had a really good paying job. I mean, I was right out of high school making, decent money, more money than I started making right off the bat teaching. You know what I mean? Like I was doing good, but it wasn't my dream to work at this call center, and to manage these people.
But it was comfortable.
It's comfortable. And so, I owned a home. I had all this stuff going for me. And my wife and I decided, you know what? You want to be a teacher? She wanted to move back to San Diego and we were not living in San Diego at the time. And it was like, what if I quit my job and I go to school full time and I become a teacher? Right. And it was huge. It was crazy. But we did it. And then I'm just thinking more recently, I mean, my wife staying home from work, that was a big risk like that we took, especially because we did it a few months earlier than we planned. Like we were planning on doing it in December. She would still be working right now. And we'd kind of planned out our budget that way. And then we looked at it and we're like, you know what? I think we're actually not going to give up that much if we just go full time, faster, sooner, harder on eBay now. And you can already be home. And so we took that risk and it's panning out and it's working. And so, yeah, I mean, you sometimes have to look at life and say, what are the obstacles? And one thing that I think that's really good that this book didn't do is just say like, go take risk for no reason, right? Like I feel like in the past we've read books that's kind of just take a risk,
when everybody says don't do it,
right? Whereas he gives an example of a rescue mission that they do, and he says it was risky. They did it during the daytime instead of nighttime, and the reason they did it during the daytime is because there's just this opportune moment came up that they would never get again. And even though there was more risk, there was more opportunity if it worked out. And so they did it and there was mistakes, things went wrong, but it was successful ultimately. And one thing I like that he says, however, contrary to what outsiders saw, the risk was usually calculated, thoughtful, and well-planned. Even if it was spontaneous, the operators knew their limits, but believed in themselves enough to try.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. Because I will say, yeah, that's been kind of, and I get it. It's kind of the entrepreneur way to go, right? That no matter what, it doesn't matter where you're at, like drop everything. Maybe it's even better if you're $100,000 in debt. Do it, right? And maybe I'm, being a little extreme, but there are individuals that push that agenda. I don't think we do.
No, and I think this is good. I think this idea of like there might be a moment where you have to be spontaneous, but it should be based off of enough understanding of your own strengths, your own abilities, and trust that you can actually succeed, right? If this was go down this rope head first and you've never done anything like it, and you don't even know if you can hold on to it or stop yourself at the end, and you're like, I'm doing it because I'm going to go head first down this obstacle, that's crazy. But if you know yourself and you're like, I have the physical strength to hold on to this rope, I know that I have the ability and the technique to stop myself at the end. I'm doing this, even though there's a risk involved, I trust that I have the ability to make it. So there's a difference between just blindly taking risk and saying, you know what, I'm taking this risk. However, it's based off of an understanding that I have what's necessary to do it. And there might be times when there's uncertainty and you can't weigh out everything. But I think a big part of what this is teaching is know yourself, know what you're capable of doing, and then take risks accordingly. And I think that's important. Don't just blindly take risks, but don't be afraid of risks either, because then at that point you're saying, I don't have the ability, I don't have the strength, I don't have the knowledge or whatever it is. And if you really don't have the knowledge and strength and ability, then don't do it. But if it's just fear that's keeping you from doing it, well, the obstacle course is going to beat you every time.
No, agreed. And that's part of, what I wanted to share too, was that part of that move that I made, similar to the move to being a full-time reseller, was that there's one thing I know. And what I know about myself is that I work hard. What, do I execute well? That's another story, right? But whether I work hard or not, and so if you know certain things about yourself, right, that no matter the situation, you will make things happen, then that's part of being prepared.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I knew if I had moved to San Diego and things were really bad, I couldn't, afford things here, I would find another job, or I would end up flipping stuff. I would end up, I always figured that out. I one year I made the terrible mistake of not teaching summer school. And summer school in the private education world is a big moneymaker.
Yeah.
And so I opted not to, because it was after my first year, actually. And I was like, I'm so done. I'm so tired. Like, I'm just going to relax. Well, what ended up happening was I tried to get a job somewhere else. And then at this other job, I felt it was insulting what they were offering me. And I didn't even let the interview finish. I just walked out. I said, how much? They said, told me the amount. And I said, I think this interview's done. And I walked out. Okay, don't even.
That's a nice mic drop moment there.
It was, but it was an immature 24-year-old mic drop moment where 30 minutes later, I'm bawling in the car, calling this employer going, hey, I'm so sorry. That was, and they were done with me.
Oh, yeah. If they hired you, that's not a company to work for. No, you don't want them as bosses.
But guess what I did that summer? I hustled that summer. I did all kinds of crazy, those Craigslist, like 1 gig. You know what I mean? Like, you work at a fair, or you did this. Like, I did all kinds of stuff. So I knew that about myself, that no matter what, I would make things happen. If I didn't know that about myself, I wouldn't have made that move. And so I think that's part of the preparation you got to make.
Yeah.
Right. So the other takeaway, he talks about rescuing those hostages in Iraq, and that their main concern was that they were exposed. Right. It was in the daytime. Usually they like the element of surprise in the evening, or at, late at night. And so he had mentioned that they had to move. Right. And he didn't use the word embarrassed, but he uses the word later. Right. He talks about later on that life is a struggle. This is towards the end of that chapter. And the potential for failure is ever present, but those who live in fear of failure or hardship or embarrassment will never achieve their potential. And I think that is huge. I think, especially in our own reselling world, whether we want to admit it or not, embarrassment is something that people don't like, right? Because yes, I don't think we're kind of like the Instagram model world where, everything has to be, beautiful and uptight, like everything has to be good. But we do like to flex. I'm using the right context here because, I usually don't use flex in the right language, right?
I'm proud of you. You're growing. You're maturing.
Appreciate it. But, we like to flex our numbers. We like to flex our sales. But, we don't like to flex when we fail. Or I don't even know if I can use it right there, right? But we don't like to
broadcast failures.
We don't like to broadcast failure for sake of embarrassment that people are going to call us out. Right? And I get that. But part of the beauty of social media is that when you put yourself out there, you can learn, because when you embarrass yourself by showing your mistakes, you'll get a lot of feedback that will help you.
Right.
And this podcast, there's been a lot of embarrassing things.
Yeah.
Well, there's been things we've said on the podcast, which I think we've kept that to a minimum so far, which has been awesome. We've had no apology, episodes yet. So hopefully we...
Let's not be too proud, though.
No, I know. But think about it. 91 episodes, like, whew. All right. And somebody's going to find something we said in episode 7 and it's going to come to light. But
yeah. What can you do?
But we get feedback in our YouTube comments. We get DMs on our Instagram. We get comments, right? We've put ourselves out there, right? We've embarrassed ourselves at times by making bad calls. I am the king of making bad calls, right? And getting called on it, which I'm fine with. Like, again, being an administrator gave me thick skin. Like, no matter how good I do things, how well I do things, no matter how right I am, I will always be wrong to somebody, right? And so I think in this business or anything that you're doing, you have to be willing to take those leaps and lose, right? And be embarrassed so you can learn from them. And I know that sounds strange. So you got to expose yourself a little bit, but like, Admiral McRaven says, it has to be a prepared kind of exposure.
Yeah, that's good.
So are we good? You ready to roll on?
Yeah. Chapter 7, stand up to the bullies. If you want to change the world, don't back down from the sharks. Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on this chapter?
I mean, it was interesting. I
knew you were going to go somewhere with it.
I think it's good because this is one of those things where, I mean, we've even been called out on this. Like, this doesn't directly relate to reselling. Well, not every aspect of your life does, but who you are impacts every aspect of your life, right? So I think this is an important thing to recognize. Like, we talk a lot on the show, or hopefully we talk enough on the show about this idea of integrity and having integrity and doing the right things even when people don't see, making good choices, being the kind of person that like your kids that you'd be proud of your kid becoming, those types of things. And I think this is one of those elements that people can often overlook when we're talking about like practical, because this might not practically make you more money, but this is a character issue. This is an integrity thing that is going to impact every part of your life. And this idea of not being afraid, not backing down from people who are bullies, people who oppress other people, people who do things in an unjust way. And so I think there's a lot to be said in this. And especially, I like that it kind of was connected to the idea of courage, that the beginning part of this is him and his swim partner are out in the water in the Coronado area, and they know that, or I think that's where they were, wherever they were. It
was by San Clemente, I think, with the sharks.
Okay, yeah, and so they knew they were great white sharks, and it's the middle of the night, and they're swimming around.
I go there all the time.
Do you?
I'm like, okay, maybe I won't go out too far.
Yeah, well, don't go out too far in the middle of the night, right? When you don't know, because that's the other thing too, is like when you're out in darkness, like it's scary. Like I don't feel like I'm like a scaredy cat type of a person, but there's been a couple of times like I'm out in the middle of nowhere where my house is, and there's no like street lights or anything around me, and I'll go outside and I'll do some stuff, and we're talking, it is so dark you can't see anything other than there's stars out, and you hear some noises, and it's like, it's creepy, right? Like it can freak you out a little bit.
I've been up there, I know.
Yeah, it's freaky. And so there's this fear that they have of these sharks, but it says, but we both wanted to be seals so badly that nothing in the water that night was going to stop us. If we had to fight off sharks, then we were both prepared to do so. Our goal, which we believed in to be honorable and noble, gave us courage, and courage is a remarkable quality. Nothing and nobody can stand in your way. Without it, others will define your path forward. Without it, you are at the mercy of life's temptation. Without courage, men will be ruled by tyrants and despots. Without courage, no great society can flourish. Without courage, the bullies of the world will rise up. With it, you can accomplish any goal. With it, you can defy and defeat evil. And I know that was kind of a long quote, but I think that's really the aspect of this is, are you courageous enough to stand up against the wrongs and to stand up and do what's right? And I like this idea of like, once you have that goal set, when you have a goal, it gives you the courage you need to be strong.
Agreed. So I like what he says because he doesn't, you read this and you're like, stand up to bullies. So when I first read this, I thought about what I always told my boys. I told my boys, if there's ever somebody, being a punk to you, making fun of you or doing anything, you just deck them in the face. I mean, that's always been my mantra of my boys. Like, and my boys have applied that a couple times, and I get the call and I'm like, well, he stood up for himself. What do you want me to do? And guess what? That bully stopped. Now, I'm not recommending violence, okay? You do what you want with your kids. That's just the way it is for me. And my kids aren't going to be picked on. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the 100% best way. I'm willing to admit that, okay? So McRaven here talks about his time with Saddam.
Yeah,
Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Baghdad. Those of you that may have been born after this happened that are listening would be 16. Yeah, they'd be 16 or 15. So maybe there's not many.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I just feel really old when I start talking about like 9/11 and the war in Iraq stuff. I mean, that was 16 years ago, right? 2003 is when we invaded Iraq.
Yep.
So Saddam is removed from Baghdad. He's in holding with the U.S. And McRaven has interactions with Saddam Hussein daily. Like, I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this guy murdered thousands, right? Anyways, we're not going to get historical on it, but this guy's a bad guy.
Bad guy.
Right?
He's the butcher of Baghdad. Yeah.
But here's the thing. Like, when you watch a movie, usually when there's a confrontation with that bad guy, and usually that guy's being slammed against the wall, he's getting beat to a pulp, like, hey, we're done with you. But McRaven doesn't do that in here, right? What McRaven notices towards the end of the chapter is that the men that were from Iraq that were in the same room were super intimidated. And when Saddam would look at them and tell them, give them the sign to sit down, they would follow along because they were scared. McRaven, instead of going in there like this, big tough guy and beating the living daylights out of Saddam, which Saddam, if you look at him at that time, I'm pretty sure most people could have beat the daylights out of him. I mean, he was pretty emaciated. He was in hiding. He doesn't do that. Instead, he puts him in his place by not acknowledging his power.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's really the key there is, right? Like people thrive off that intimidation. Like he got his power because people were afraid. And by not acknowledging that power or even respecting it of like, oh, you're this bad guy, but it's kind of just like, yeah, whatever, go sit down. Like,
yeah, Saddam sat down when he told him to.
Yeah, because that removed that power. Like when and it's kind of a cliche. People always say like, well, if someone makes fun of you, if you don't react to it, like you take the power away from them. And there is some truth to that. Like people who make fun of other people, like I just think like I teach 6th graders now, so I see this all the time. And the people who react to it, if you're constantly reacting and you really are feeding into, you're giving them pleasure, right? Like the people who like the bullies, it's sick. They get the pleasure from watching people, be upset and hurt. And we all have a tendency to be like that in one area or another, right? Like where you can almost be like, haha, other people have something bad happen to them. But here is this idea of like, if you can take that power away from them, if you're not afraid of them, if you don't give into it, they have no power or authority over you.
Yeah, and that's what he did with Saddam. I mean, he just went in there every day, didn't get worked up, just told him, go back to your cell, treated him like he was a nobody. And over time, Saddam fell into place, right? And it reminds you of the story when I was in 8th grade. There was a bully, and I remember this guy was just a punk, just, beat on everybody, scared. And he was a scary dude. I remember one time, we were playing basketball in the gym and, it was a pickup game and, he didn't like what I did. I don't know if I threw an elbow or whatever. I don't know what I did. And he came up to me and he looked at me and I said, what are you going to do? And he looked back at me and he said some expletives and he socked me, like just decked me, like right hook, pain. And I didn't react. I just looked back at him. I did like this Terminator move with my head. If you're listening to the podcast, I hope you understand, when the Terminator moves his head. And I looked at him and I just mean mugged him. I just stared right in his face. I was dying inside of pain, but I didn't react. I didn't punch him back. And he just looked at me. And that was the last time that guy ever said anything or ever attempted anything on me again. Now, I'm not saying that's the way to go. But it's kind of applied, I think, on multiple levels in the sense that his power was the reaction he could get out of me, right? If he got under my skin, right? If he was able to get me to react, it's kind of, whether it's on social media, whether it's on social media comments, whether it's anywhere, right? Whether it's in business, whether it's, in your own personal life, the power, it's automatically taken away when there's no acknowledgement of it. right? And I'm not saying, and again, that wasn't a, laid back, do what you want, like, stance. That was a hard stance. And again, it breaks down that power. So just something to think about. I really appreciated how McRaven, his non-reaction was the reaction, which took away the power.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, connecting it back to reselling, if I can, is
definitely can.
Yeah, when you are living a life like this, and we talk about reselling as a lifestyle. So this obviously is an integrity thing that can affect every part of your life, but specifically the reselling, there's going to be people who mock your lifestyle. There are going to be people who don't understand it. There's going to be times when, you're going to face those kinds of oppositions, or maybe you're going to be in a place where you aren't the one, but you're seeing that happen to other people. And you have the ability to kind of either one, really ignore it and be like General McRaven when he was out swimming with the sharks. And it's like, I have a goal. Like, my goal is to provide for my family with this type of lifestyle that we're living. And I'm not going to let anything, whether it's a shark or a person's comments or the wave, even going back to that embarrassment of like how other people see me, I'm not going to let those things have power over me, because I have courage, because I have this goal that to me is more important. That's providing for my family or having this lifestyle or whatever it is. And so, it definitely, it can connect in that way. And it reminds me of a story when I was in high school. This is now the second time I brought up being on the football team. Now I feel like
he was an all-star athlete, D1, college bound.
So
Bundy. Oh my goodness.
Yep. So
we're not gonna go
my one game, right? But no,
there's multiple dads that do that, like on shows. So we don't have to go Al Bundy on it.
So, but I remember I want to say I was a junior at the time, and the kid that this happened to was a sophomore. And he was a little bit of an oddball character, and the seniors at the time on the football team, they were bullies. Like, we all looked up to them. We all wanted to be like them because they were awesome. They were great. They won games. They were really good. And so we all kind of like wanted to be like them. But to be on the in-crowd, you had to be like them. And they were cruel. They were mean. And there was this one kid that he was the easy target, and he was picked on and he was treated poorly all the time. And they would always at the end of practice run to like his bag, because he always had like snacks and Gatorade and stuff. And they would always eat and drink his stuff. And I remember one time, me and my friend were like standing, we kind of walked up to him. We're like we're sorry that like that happened to you. Like, that's not right. Like, we feel really bad. Like, do you want us to go buy you like another Gatorade? Like, we can't stop them because we were cowards, right? Like, we weren't going to stand up to them, but like, we at least wanted to let this kid know that he was, I'm not alone in this. And he kind of just smiled and said, "It's okay. I peed in the bottle."
Oh my!
I know that's it's a little intense, right? But it was just that moment.
A little. Like, that's pretty intense.
Is it? Well, I don't know.
Especially in that. Anyways, okay, let's keep.
But it just made me think though that like that moment of like I was a coward in that moment, but like seeing a little bit of justice, and I just remember thinking like I've thought about on that moment all the time. Like, there was like, I guess you could say justice happened in that situation, but I just think of like if I could go back.
This story will always be remembered now on PHP.
All right.
That's all I'm gonna say.
As long as we don't edit it out, right?
We're not editing this out.
Okay.
We're dropping this actually in 35 minutes.
Yeah, this is Sunday, and
we're recording on Sunday because we wanted to make this happen. Some things came up, but we're dedicated to the podcast.
And so we want to be very clear. Pure Hustle Podcast does not condone hitting people, violence, or any kind of retaliation towards bullies, including doing anything wrong to Liquid. So that is not what we are saying. But
that's our legal disclaimer.
But we've all experienced in our life, like, there are those people who are cruel and mean, and in what way as individuals can we stand up to that? And I'm not saying retaliate, but don't be afraid. Don't cower, because when you don't have that goal, a system of values that is guiding you, things are going to go poorly for you, and things are going to go better for the bad people.
I was 100% agree. The whole time I'm here, I'm looking at Mike's notes on his computer. I'm looking over and it says, Saddam, pee in the bottle, - stand up for others. And I'm like, where's he? What? The whole time, we're talking, I'm looking at this going, where's he going with this? Well, now I know. Sometimes you can't judge notes by what they initially say.
That's right.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing that story.
Yeah, I hope it's appropriate. I hope we don't lose any of our listeners on that one.
Listen, there's far worse that's been done. All right. Hey, so he talks about dark moments in here twice, and I want to bring this up because...
Are we moving on to chapter 8?
We are, but I just want to dwell on this one thought real quick.
Are we still on chapter 7?
I think so. Am I jumping the gun? Oh, we're on chapter 8.
Okay, so chapter 8 is rise to the occasion. If you want to change the world, be your very best in the darkest moments.
Ah, yes. And so I think this is huge because, and it depends where you're at. Like some people have had dark moments in their teenage lives. Some people have dark moments in their 20s. Some people, actually, I know some people that they're in their 40s now and they've never had a bad moment. Now, again, that's what I know.
Yeah.
Right? We really never know.
Yeah, some people are good at hiding the darkness that they're experiencing.
That sounds really bad, but it's true. It is true. But I really think, it applies to reselling 100% because I'm experiencing this now, and I'll talk about it in the next podcast where, the entrepreneur life, it's so up and down, especially if you are the main, person providing income for your family. You go through this, things are really good. Like I'm going to scale this, I'm going to be good. And then things go really poorly. And it's a dark time, and you start questioning and going, what am I doing? Is this worth it? And then the next day, you have all these sales, and you're like, oh, this is all good, right? It just goes up and down, up and down. And I knew that, but I really didn't know that. And I would say I didn't know that until probably this last month where things got really interesting. Not interesting in the sense that things were going to be really bad because, like McRaven had stated a couple of chapters ago, when you take risk, it's calculated risk. So my risk was calculated that I have, and I was talking to Mike the other day about this, I have a certain number in savings that if I drop below that number, then I begin to look at other options.
Right.
Right. I don't wait till I'm at 0.
Yep.
Right. And I would recommend those of you that are thinking about going full time, don't make 0 your number. Don't make 5K your number. Don't make 10K. Make it something that you could go a long time. Right. Because there are going to be those moments where you're not going to make money. And if you quit at that moment, you don't know what's around the corner, right? So you got to have enough to carry you through those tough times, right? And in here, he says on page 77, no matter how dark it gets, you must complete the mission. This is what separates you from everyone else. And I think that 100% applies to life and applies to reselling. I mean, I look back a year ago, how many resellers, we had followers and we had different people that DM'd us, and they went through tough moments, and some just said, I'm done with reselling, right? They just walked away, and which is totally fine. I'm okay with that. Like I always say, reselling is life, but reselling isn't life.
Right.
Right. In the sense that if there's something else that creates an ROI of happiness or of encouragement, then go that route. Don't just stick with reselling because you made an Instagram account or you did a YouTube or you made a podcast, right? That shouldn't be the reason why you're sticking to it. Now, if the reason is because you can make this happen and you're in a rough spot, what's going to separate you is making it through that rough spot.
Right.
Right. Because when things are good, it's easy for things to be good. Right. But when things are rough, that's going to really determine, are you, and I say this all the time, am I an entrepreneur? Like, can I hang through those difficult moments?
Good.
So did you have anything more to add?
Yeah. Just again, like, I think that's great. Like, I think it's just encouraging too, to say like, sometimes it's reselling, sometimes it's outside life, right? Like,
oh yeah, I think it's way more outside life than reselling.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the moments, and I don't want to like even say it's bragging. It's not even bragging, but I don't want to dwell on it in that sense. But I am proud of the fact that when I was going through my master's program, I decided to do a 1-year program instead of doing a 2-year program.
So intense.
And I'm a full-time teacher, so I'm going through that, and my wife is pregnant, right? So we decided to get through it before we were planning on having a kid, and we're like, if I'm going to go through this program, I need to go through it before we have a child, because once we have a child, like, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be finishing up my program, and I'm going to have an infant up to about like 4 months or so. Okay, so that to me was an easier time than trying to go through my master's program with a 2-year-old, right? Because it's like, he doesn't require as much when he's young. So we planned this out. Well, things happen that you don't always plan, right? And my son, when he was born, he's got a couple of medical conditions, and immediately after his birth was taken into the NICU and checked out, and they were like, okay, he seems to be good. And so he came back to the room with us that first night, and he was going to sleep with us. Or actually, the first night he slept in like a separate room where they kept an eye on him. Then the second night he was with us, and the nurse noticed his breathing was really, really, really fast, like faster than it should have been a few times. And so the NICU doctors came in, took him back to the NICU, and he ended up spending over 8 days in the NICU, and they couldn't figure it out. There was no reason. His breathing, his oxygen levels kept dropping. And I just remember that feeling of helplessness as like the alarms are going off, the machines are beeping, and we're now discharged from the hospital. So like we're going home and coming back to the hospital back and forth, and we can't take our son home with us, right? And it's miserable, but I still have a master's program that I'm in, and I still have classwork to do, and I still have assignments to submit. And so I don't think anybody would have, if I would have dropped out of the program or asked for extensions, I don't think anybody would have said like, oh, that's weak of you, right? Like I had every excuse, every reason. It would have been justified for me to have kind of stepped out and said like, right now, this is not the time. But I also knew there was nothing I could do for my son. He's being watched, and I'm sitting beside his bed, and I'm not sleeping because I'm overwhelmed with like, anxiety and all of this stuff, but I can still do the things that I have control over. And so I kept going, and I kept working on my master's degree program, and I got through it. And now my son is happy, healthy. Things are going great. And I look back to that time, and that was a dark moment in my life, but I kept going. I kept going because, not going wasn't going to change anything. If I would have given up, it wouldn't have changed anything. And so I share that because I know every one of our listeners has something in their life like that, some moment in their life where they can look at and say like, things have been really, really rough. And if they haven't experienced it yet, like it will come. General McRaven says at some point we will all confront a dark moment in life. If not the passing of a loved one, then something else that crushes your spirit and leaves you wondering about your future. In that dark moment, reach deep inside of yourself and be your very best. And so that's just a reminder to everybody, like when that dark moment comes, don't give in, reach deep inside. And that's the moment to be your best. Have that integrity then.
So I want to break down that quote. I'm glad you ended with that quote because I think it's a great point. I think the very first part, at some point in life, confront a dark moment. Yes. I mean, there's various, motivational speakers that talk about how are you going to react, right? Because the way you react is going to determine a lot whether you're going to succeed or not. Right. And, the dark moments, like with you, I remember being there with your son, and that was a dark time for you. That was rough. I remember that. And, the masters is kind of, you have different levels, right? Yeah. Right. Dark moment with your son, that's like, I don't know, level 1, like top priority, like that's really rough, right? Your masters, it's like 3 or 4 or 5, right? Stuff like that. So I want you guys to understand that we're not, there's plenty of level 1s that we could talk about.
Yeah.
But, this is a podcast and there's thousands that listen, and I'm not willing to put all my level 1s out there. Right. And, or maybe not any, but what I will tell you is, I know a lot of you have reached out to us on DMs and talked to us about your level 1s. Right. And we're not, I'm not asking for you guys to share with us, right? Because we're not therapists, right? I would say seek professional help if things are really bad, right? Really rough. But you've reached out to us because you express that you have a similar situation happening, or that, one time, I had shared with the fact that sometimes it's good to just recognize that things are just bad. Right. And some of you had talked about that you needed that because you felt that so much pressure had been put on to you to, always put up a good front and always be that role model. But sometimes you have to just acknowledge the bad. Yeah. So McRaven, I don't think, I say this a lot with what he says. I think he's very 100% positive, like keep, his one chapter, move forward. Right. Yeah. Or, dare to be great or whatever you want to say it. And I truly believe when he says things, he's trying to be motivational and he's not taking things out. So what I mean by that is if you go to the second part of the quote, he says, in that dark moment, reach deep inside yourself and be your very best, right? This is the very end of that chapter. And I want to add to that, don't only just reach in deep inside yourself because there may be nothing left. I'm being real. There may be nothing left, right? Depending on that dark moment, something might have just rocked you. And you have to reach out to others, right? I feel like we're some, I
mean, it kind of goes back to one of his earlier points, right? Of it takes a team.
Yeah. And because here's what happens. And whether this be in reselling and you destroyed your business by making a bad call and it's on you. And you're like, well, the last time we reached deep inside and try to figure things out, this is what happened. Okay. So you need to reach out to others who have done the same. Right. Or experienced the same. Right. And it's kind of one of those things. And, where I talk, back in the day, I used to, mentor a lot of people about different things. And I would only mentor those that I had the same experience and I made it through. Like, I wouldn't mentor someone that I had no experience about going through something, because like, who am I to say anything, right? Unless I've been through something, I can't really speak on it, right? But what I learned is that not only me, speaking into the life of the individual, but them connecting to others going through the same, help them through that dark transition, right? Whatever it may be, whether it's reselling related, family related, grieving through something. Like, I know a lot of this self-help stuff is all about, it's all up to you, it's only you, which I think there's truth to that, right? Ultimately, if your business succeeds, right, a huge part of it is you. The other part of it's the market, right? But there's another part of it is that, why we are on YouTube, why we're on podcasts, why we're in social media is because to learn and to reach out to others. So don't think that that dark moment, is just meant for you to go through it alone. I don't know. I just wanted to share this because, man, you can get into some really dark places if you're by yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Really dark places. And so I wanted to be clear about that, yeah, you can go, yeah, I made it through on my own, and you can, but it's so much better when you're going through it with others. And that's my $20 to my 2 cents.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. That's good.
All right, let's go to the next chapter.
Right,
I feel like we got really real on that one.
I think we're always really real.
I think
speaking of which, maybe it's a good time for a little stinger, right? Or
our little elevator pitch.
Yeah,
that's 60 seconds. Hey, if you haven't had a chance yet, we are on social media. We are Pure Hustle Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Hey, thank you. All you guys have come over from TikTok. We have, I was kind of surprised because, sometimes you don't know what you'll get on TikTok. Like you
don't know what you're going to get on TikTok.
One of the latest comments is, I really like that makeup you have on.
Oh yeah, we get that.
Or the other one was like,
this is the bot comments.
Yeah, I love your cosplay outfit. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, who are you?
You should see Pure Hustle Podcast in cosplay. It's awesome.
But there are some legit people that do follow us and have come over and are listening to the podcast. So thank you guys. Thank you to all of you that are on Instagram following us and listening to the podcast, and on Facebook. We're also Pure Hustle Cast on Twitter.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, we are Pure Hustle Podcast. Please hit that bell button and that like, because the more likes we get, the higher we end up in the searches. And hey, leave a comment if there's anything you agree or disagree with. Hey, we're always willing to interact. And sometimes we'll just go like, you might be right.
Because you know what that means when Orlando says that.
Well, because you might be right. I deep inside probably think you're wrong, but you might be right. So just being real. And you can always give us a call, 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. That's purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And if you ever want to say thank you in a monetary way, again, we're always grateful. Thank you so much for the donations that, come in. And sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. But every single dollar or change, we haven't had change come in, though. It's all been dollars.
Yeah.
Can you do change through PayPal?
I don't know. There's probably enough of a fee on our end that it wouldn't be worth it.
That is true. But hey, we have a link below if you just want to say thank you. And hey, if anyway these level up reviews have helped you, we'd love it if in the reviews on iTunes you talk about the level up review, because we got a lot of the reselling stuff on there. But if we get some level up review feedback, that would be awesome. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, and again, that's the only thing I could ask for is just keep giving us reviews on iTunes. It's huge. I think at some point we need to do like some kind of like fun giveaway or something for a random person for a review.
Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be like we're picking a 5-star review, but just like any, like if you give us a review, like, we'll try and find we'll do something, right? Because honestly, you giving us reviews is like the most impactful thing for our podcast. That makes the biggest difference about getting the word out. And we never ask for money for our content. As far as like, if you want our content, you have to pay for it.
It's always free.
So if you would like to really help us out, your contribution could just be sharing that. That would be huge.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you that continue to support us since day one, even with the books that you don't agree with. Thanks for following us along the Level Up Review, because, some books, we love and some books we don't. And it is what it is.
Yep.
So,
hey, but no matter what, you come out of it and you think, right? And that's kind of the idea.
That's true.
To constantly be thinking, think deeply. And then we always want to give people hope, and chapter 9 is give people hope.
All right.
Yeah. And if you want to change the world, start singing when you're up to your neck in mud.
That's rough. That's the last thing.
That's a good one.
It is, because it's when everything else is against you, do something completely opposite. Right? Because what he's talking about is during Hell Week, correct?
Yep.
And they're in mud and it's cold, right? And it's up to their neck.
Yep. And the instructors are berating them and making it difficult and really trying to like make them miserable, right? Like that's the whole idea. The whole idea of the Hell Week for these people going through BUD/S, going through SEAL training, is to weed out the people who are going to give up, right? And so that's the job of the instructors. He said that multiple times. So that's what they're doing, is they're trying to make you quit. I mean, usually your teacher, like if you think of teachers or people like that, your mentors, your coaches, they want you to succeed. The SEAL instructors want everybody who's going to fail as quickly as possible so that they can then begin to train the people who are worthy, I guess you could say.
That are willing to make
to
it
go
happen.
through it. And that is the right and loving thing, I guess, for them to do for the team, because you don't want people with you.
I love what you said, the loving thing.
I mean, it is, because
he loves those guys.
Well, because
I'm messing around.
If you care about the person next to you, you want everybody on the team to be able to contribute, right? And so you have no problem with getting rid of the people who are going to be a liability to your team. And so the things they say and do can be cruel. But we've got this story of them, like literally there's like the instructor with the bullhorn yelling at them, and somebody is about ready to give up. Oh, actually, you know what? Was he
like Major Pain? That's what I think about when you throw that out there. No, I know. Yeah, it wasn't like that. But
so I could be wrong. I don't think he was yelling at them in a bad way to start with. It's basically like, you can quit type of a thing. And
no, he offered them.
Chocolate,
he said, "Hey, there's hot chocolate. There's some warm blankets.
All you gotta do is give up." Yeah,
he just threw some honey
it's almost
out
like
there.
Psychology, like they're getting in their head. And so somebody's like stands up and he's ready to quit, and General McRaven is like grabs at his arms, like, "No, come back." But the guy's the draw to quit is so much because it's so uncomfortable to be cold, miserable, in the mud, haven't slept. They don't sleep for like 6 days straight. Like it's crazy.
Have you tried not to sleep for a day?
Yeah, 24 hours is hard enough. Like I can't imagine going
I went
that
48 hours and it was like you start losing your sanity. Right? I remember I went paintballing and what that make you laugh?
I don't know.
The fact that I got rocked. So and we went camping and I just couldn't sleep. So I literally was up probably 48 hours and
you couldn't sleep because you had so many like paintball sores? Or?
No. The camping, like I am
so
not
exciting.
It was so terrible. Like I was a city
camping.
Kid. Camping. So we went tent camping and it was kind of like we paintballed all day, which is exhausting. Tent camping, and the next day went paintballing all day again. But I'm a city kid, so I just brought like a regular sleeping bag, and the ground was wet, and it was just miserable. Yeah, miserable.
Yeah, I mean it's bad. It can be,
and it wasn't even neck, and mud up to my neck.
Yeah, freezing cold. But the whole idea of this chapter is somebody starts singing, right? Like as somebody's like walking away to give up, somebody starts, and he doesn't even tell us the song. In fact, he says like the song is probably like not appropriate for tender ears, right? But he says like everybody
Tinder or tender,
huh?
I'm joking.
So it's not appropriate for like for the tender ears out there. But he says everybody knew it and they started singing, and it brought the person back. Like they had a little bit of hope because they're all in it together. They're all suffering together, and there's kind of this like, we can do this in your face instructors. And then the instructor gets on the bullhorn. That's when he gets on the bullhorn and he's yelling at them to stop singing, and they don't. They sing louder, and he's like, seriously, knock it off or I'm going to go make your life miserable. And they sing louder, right?
I will tell you, this is hard for me to think about because I'm thinking about a bunch of huge dudes, like, all swole in the mud with deep voices singing.
Yeah. Well, they weren't singing with deep voices, probably like raspy, like they could barely get it out. They're miserable.
No. I know. I'm sure. It's something different though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's so good. It's this idea. And I guess the takeaway from this is, there are going to be times in life where things are really hard, where other people around you want to give up. Like we even face that a lot with reselling. We never ever want to be, we get accused of it, but we never want to be the people who sell false dream. No. Like we never say like, hey, just quit your job. You're going to make 6 figures reselling, easy peasy. But we also don't want to be the people who don't provide people encouragement when they need it. There are times when people like, this is what they want to do. but they might be going through a rough part and they're like, you know what, I don't know if it's worth it. And we want to be the people to say like, you know what, keep hustling, keep working, keep going, and providing that motivation, providing that inspiration, because sometimes that's all you need. And I just can imagine how mad the instructors are getting, because I remember there was a time when I was in, going back to football, man, I'm never bringing up football again.
But Al Bundy status.
Yeah, I know. But I remember that was one of the things is like the seniors got to kind of during the Hell Week got to be mean to like the freshmen and get them going, and like kind of discourage them, but encourage them at the same time. It was like a rite of passage that I don't even think is legal to do anymore. And I remember like me and some of the other senior guys, and not the bullying like we're talking about earlier, but like, just fun hazing. We're like telling people like, yeah, do push-ups, do whatever. And there was this one kid who just smiled at me the whole time. And every time I'm like, stop smiling at me. And he keeps smiling. And that got under my skin in ways I can't even express. He won. Yeah. And so I could just imagine these instructors like, stop singing, I'm going to make your life more miserable. And they just keep singing louder. Right. But honestly, that was the lesson the instructors wanted to instill in them, right? Is be a team, be willing to do something awkward and embarrassing, but to encourage other people, put yourself in that place. And yeah, how can you do that? Like, how in your life can you be inspiring to those around you when they're ready to give up? Because I promise you, there will be a time in your life when it's you that wants to give up. And you're going to hope that there's somebody around to come and grab you by the arm and kind of drag you along, because sometimes you need that.
And the other side is you could be that person, right? And that's, we talk about being positive a lot in the reselling community, but it's so true. Like, you never know. It's kind of, it's funny on Instagram. We'll post something and we're like, we just got to post something to trigger that algorithm.
Yeah, do it for the algorithm.
We know other people do that. We're not the only ones. Okay. We're just being real with it. And we're like, well, just post it, just drop it. And then we'll get all this feedback going, wow, thank you so much. It's what I needed, or I learned something. And we're like, oh, all right, awesome, right?
Yeah, that's what we meant the whole time.
That's exactly why we posted that. But that's kind of the same thing here. Like, you never know where your positive outlook or your words of encouragement can be the game changer for that individual, right? So the key thing, right, if you want to change the world, is just going along with the whole idea that not having to sing when you're up to your neck in mud, but being that individual that no matter how tough things are, right, being able to speak encouragement into someone else, because you never know. Yep. You just never know.
And I think singing is a good representation too of just kind of having like joy, like no matter how bad things get, like if you can still smile. And I think that's another way of thinking about it, like smile, laugh, sing in the face of adversity. And it's going, just that act alone. Like, I'm not one of those guys that believes that like, you can change the future of the universe by like the way you think. But at the same time, you can change your perspective about things, which changes a lot about the way you handle situations.
Oh, agreed.
And so
100%.
Yeah. And I just even think, smiling when you're on a difficult phone call or dealing with those things and trying to like find the humor when things get rough, right? Like, you do something bad, embarrassing, and instead of like wallowing in self-pity, you stand up and you say like, man, that's funny. And you kind of make fun of yourself through the situation and you move on, and you look at the positive instead of the negative. And that kind of leads us. Do you have anything else on this chapter?
Nope.
All right. That leads us to chapter 10. Never, ever quit. If you want to change the world, don't ever, ever ring the bell.
It's funny when I heard about, I watched his speech and he talks about it, and I just keep thinking of the KO bell, right? In boxing, right? Ding, 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 ding,
yep.
And when especially when the fight's still going and they're trying to end it, right? And this is huge because I think, I don't know. I mean, we already talked about this a lot, going through dark times, moving forward. Like this is kind of the theme of the book. But ringing that bell is so easy. Now, let's give context to it. What does he mean by ring that bell?
All right. So in the SEAL training, you can give up at any point. Like this is one of the few things in life, like a lot of things in life you go through and like you have no choice, right? This is like, they're like, hey, we're going to make your life so miserable. You're going to hate anything and everything. And you're going to wish you were never born. But all you got to go do is go ring that bell. And we've got a nice cup of hot coffee waiting for you. We'll give you a nice bed to sleep in. Like basically the allure is ring the bell. Life gets easy. Life gets like, there's not a lot of things in life where like you're going through a difficult time and it's like, all I have to do is quit. And then things are instantly better, right? But that is the temptation that they're faced with every day. There's this bell. But then at the same time, there's almost that humiliation of, I have to now go in front of all of my peers, all of my teammates, all the people that I said, like, I'm strong enough to stand by you and I'll make it through and we'll make it. And you go and you ring that, right? And so there's this simultaneous easing of the burden, and at the same time, this humiliation of, I was not capable. You don't get to just like walk away in like obscurity or silence. Like, you have to basically stand before everybody and say, I am not worthy, or I'm not capable, or I'm not strong enough. I give up. And that public display of giving up, you would think, and again, you've talked about, like, these are often like big, burly, strong, manly men who've made it oftentimes through already weeks and weeks of difficulty, and yet they're still willing to go ring the bell. And that says something, not just about the difficulty of the program, but it says something about the nature of the people who make it through. The fact that there are so many people who are just honorable, very capable people going through this program, and even they're giving up, it then makes those who don't ring the bell, it makes it that much more important, that much more special.
Agreed. And it very much applies to reselling. One of the things that stuck out to me, we interviewed Side Hustle Network, the Side Hustle Network, a couple of episodes ago, and they had talked about when they entered reselling, when they both, quit their jobs. They said, this is all there was going to be. There's nothing else. We're burning the ships. We're moving forward, right? And if you're wondering where that comes from, the burning the ships, that's from, I feel bad as a historian. I can remember. I want to say it's Cortez when he landed in Mexico, and he, the story is that he burned the ships, and this is what we're going to conquer, and we're going to make things happen. Don't want to do that. We don't want to oppress and conquer people. Okay, but what I'm trying to say here is, you sink those ships. There is nothing else, right? Once you make a call to do something that is, I would say, a huge game changer, you have to move forward. And I would say for me, that's kind of one of the struggles I had going full time as a reseller, was that I, for a long time, had in my head, if things don't work out, I'll go back to teaching, which I love teaching. I still may go back to teaching one day. Don't know when, but I always had this thing because, I had developed enough of a resume and enough connections that, if things ever got to a place, I could automatically, find something really quick. It wouldn't be tough. But I had to get to a place where I was like, no, either I'm all in and I'm going to make this happen, or I should just go back to doing the side hustle, because I'm never going to be able to grow. And unless, I deal with the very difficult times and I make it through those difficult times, this isn't going to work out. And I'm going to end up being, just like, every other, thing that you see where it's, people are like, I'm going all in, and then they fall away. Right now, with that all being said, there comes a time where not only is it like, hey, I'm not going to ring that bell, but I'm also going to make sure that the bell is nowhere available to me. Right? Because if you're constantly going, hey, and it's kind of the same thing I'm trying to say, but if you're constantly saying, hey, there's that bell, there's that bell, there's that bell, that's how you're going to function. That's how you're going to react. I truly believe everything you do will be with a bell in mind. But if that bell is out of sight, out of mind, and there is no bell, and this is all you know, that's how you're going to work. That's how you're going to function with your business or whatever it is you're dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think a couple of things that I kind of want to add to that. So one, I'll give a quote that was said by the beginning when they started this program, and the bell was being introduced and the instructor was explaining it, and he rung it even. He says, but let me tell you something. Because he said, like, it's easy. You can give up. And he said, I'm going to try and make all of you give up. I mean, it starts hard. Like, my job is to make you ring this bell. That's what I want more than anything. It gives me pleasure when you guys ring the bell, right? But he says this. He says, but let me tell you something. He said, if you quit, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Quitting never makes anything easier. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something really profound to be said there. Now, here's the caveat that I want to add to this. People take this to the extreme and they get locked into foolish things instead of, like what we always talk about, adapting, changing. Sometimes the goal moves. Sometimes this is a moving target, right? And so don't get locked into like, this is how I'm doing it and I'm never going to quit. Even when all of the signs are saying this is no longer profitable, you need to adapt. You need to change. You need to move. And so people get this idea of never quitting, right? And they'll be like, yeah, I mean, I've even heard people make, joking comments like, yeah, I was going to quit smoking, but I'm no quitter, right? Or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, but that's not the type of quitting that's being talked about here. And even still, like sometimes you might say, you got to think like, what is big goal? Big goal is usually not, I want to be a reseller, right? Or I want to sell lots of items. There's usually a bigger goal. What's the why, right? The why is, well, I want to have this lifestyle. I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to work on my own time. I want to be able to enjoy what I'm doing, right? There's usually like a bigger why. And so you got to think about that when it comes to not quitting. That's your goal, right? It might not be, I want to be a clothes reseller, or I want to sell VCRs. Like that is my goal, is I'm going to make 6 figures selling VCRs, or whatever it is, or I'm just eBay, or I'm Amazon. Because maybe 5 years from now, those things might not be profitable for you anymore, and you have to completely change. So you might have to quit on eBay or Amazon or whatever it is to change and adapt, but you're not quitting on the big goal, right? And that's the idea here, is you will regret it forever if you have something truly that you care about. Because if you quit something and it doesn't haunt you, it probably wasn't something that you really cared about in the first place, you know? But if you quit on something that you truly care about, it will haunt you. And so you have to kind of ask yourself, is reselling that thing? And maybe not reselling, but is this lifestyle that you want? Is that the thing? Is that the goal that you're willing to go for? And it might be as simple as providing for your family, right? And I say that's simple, but if that's your ultimate goal, then going back to a 9 to 5 doesn't necessarily mean you've quit. It means you've had to adapt to make that ultimate goal happen. But maybe your ultimate goal is more specific than that, and is, I want to be able to work from home, right? Well, maybe it's reselling, but if that avenue that closes down for you, that doesn't mean you quit on your ultimate goal. It doesn't mean you quit on that. You just have to find ways to make it through and never give up.
Yeah. I kind of look at it as like the bell gets farther and farther away. Right. And so as you get more into something, the bell begins to, at first, I think the bell's always there, right? When you first jump and you do something, you're so ready to ring that bell, right? But as you get better and better at something, right, and you start learning, that bell goes away. It's kind of interesting because I was speaking with someone the other day, and they had left. They're kind of in the, they weren't in education, but they were in a place where they had the steady paycheck, they had the benefits, like everything was good. And they went into private practice. And they said, Orlando, a year from now, you're going to be doing things entirely different. And right now, things are going well for you, but then you're going to hit a rough spot. And if you can make it through that next phase where you're doing things differently and you figure it out, like, you're really going to love what you're doing. And I thought, why? I'm doing really well. Well, sure enough, like, I talked about Q4 wasn't what I thought it'd be this last Q4, right? Summer slowdown, we figured it out. Right now, we have some other things happening right now, right? But I agree with you, because right now, the way I do things, I wouldn't say they're entirely different, but they're very much different than they were a year ago. And actually, I enjoy it more now because I don't know if I have it all figured out, but I have a lot of it figured out where I know how to do certain things that, unless I had gone through those very difficult moments in my reselling career, I guess, whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't have made those things happen. I wouldn't have adapted, right? I could have chosen, you know what, this isn't going to happen. But instead, I chose to adapt. I chose to learn. I chose to reach out. I chose to figure things out. And now I'm in an entirely different place. And so one way to never quit and never ring that bell is, like you said, is adapting. And we talk about this all the time, but I think it's very, very true that if you just keep going, I'm going to do this, this, and this the same way every single time, that bell is going to get really close to you. You got to be really careful about it.
Or you're going to go down on a sinking ship, right? Like, that's part of the thing too, is you might want to live the life of a sailor, right? But going down on a sinking ship isn't the only alternative to just finding another ship, right? Like, you can still have your dream of being out on the water. You just don't have to go down on the sinking ship. It's not like either or. And that, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make, is it's a false dichotomy to say you have to give up on the big goal if you give up on the little goal, right? Like, you can quit the small thing in order to attain the big thing. And so that is the main thing that to take out of this is you need to be specific about that too. Like, what is your goal now? And know that goal 5 years from now is going to move and change. And you have to be wise enough to keep moving that goal, getting closer and closer to what you really want your life to be like, because it's going to change. And if it's not changing, and I I think if you've got a rock solid goal, that'll stay the same. But the little goals to get there, those are going to change. And you have to be willing to abandon the ones that are leading you away from the big goal. So never quit on the thing that's really important. And sometimes you might have to quit on the things, you might be like, Poshmark, I'm quitting on because it didn't work, or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So don't be stubborn, but don't think that the only alternative is 100% stubborn or giving up completely. There is another option. So
I like the word pivot. I like your book, your next book. If whenever you read a book, should be like find another ship.
Find another ship.
But pivot in basketball, right? When you're going to the basket, right? You pivot, right? You're still going to that same basket, right? But a lane might close and you might end up having to take the other lane, or you might have to wait for a screen to happen. And you're going to have to pivot. So there's nothing wrong in pivoting. It's when you turn around and walk away is when the regrets begin to happen, right? And I agree with that. I 100% agree with you don't want to ring that bell and regret it. Like that's so big. I think now that I'm 40, I don't have a lot of regrets, but the things that I do regret, I regret a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so you don't want to put yourself in that place, and you want to make sure you're continually moving. And all these things that we've talked about, all these things that we've applied, from number one, making your bed. Yep. If you just make your bed out of this book, you won. I mean,
you're taking a step towards
a step. You won. Okay.
You won a small battle.
You won the battle, but not the war.
That's right.
Okay. Whatever way you want to word it. Right. And then these other things, right, you can go to. Right. So I hope this book was motivating to you. I hope it was inspiring. I hope it changed some aspect of your life. You have a little bit more you want to add to this here?
I just have a quote I want to end it off on.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
So the ending of the book was, life is full of difficult times, but someone out there always has it worse than you do. If you fill your days with pity, sorrowful for the way you've been treated, bemoaning your lot in life, blaming your circumstances on someone or something else, then life will be long and hard. If, on the other hand, you refuse to give up on your dreams, stand tall and strong against the odds, then life will be what you make of it, and you can make it great. Never, ever ring the bell.
And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling.
Peace.